as a clinical psychologist, I've often treated people with anxiety, and people wonder, practically, individually, clinically, why are people anxious? One of the things that's really struck me about intellectual life is how often we get the questions wrong. The reasons for anxiety are starkly self-evident. What I wonder is, why aren't people terrified out of their skulls so badly every second of their life that they can't even move? Is there meaning in life? That's a stupid question. And I'm serious about that. That's not a question you ever ask yourself if you're in pain, right? Because when you're in pain, you know that life has a meaning. It's the pain. Say, what does it all matter if in 10 billion years the earth is going to fall into, or the sun is going to expand and consume the earth? What difference does it make? And I would say, maybe the fact that posing the question in that way makes you feel miserable and wretched and futile is an indication that there's something wrong with posing the question in that manner. You should reconsider the way you're looking at the world there, buddy, because that's just not the right answer. It's just not the right question. Is it absolutely obligatory that everything that's meaningful has to be significant in some unimaginable distant future? Why is that the hallmark? Sometimes there is a problem with posing questions in a certain way. And what difference is it going to make in 10 million years is not a sufficient response to someone who's suffering. In the case of a death in the family, or a terrible illness, or the collapse of a dream, or any of the things that can flip your world upside down, is how do you cope with that? Say you have a child who's sick, maybe one who's been hurt. You say, well, what do you say or do in the face of that? You say, hey kid, I'm here with you. I'm here beside you. Matters what's happening to you. When we're asking whether or not life has meaning, that isn't what we mean. What we mean is, in the face of life's pain and suffering, does life have any positive meaning? If you encounter true malevolence, the probability that you'll walk away from it unscathed is very, very low. It will damage you psychophysiologically, and you might never recover. And that's real enough for me. You can't deny that pain is real and suffering is real, and you can't deny that suffering induced by malevolence is the worst of all possible sufferings. Those are all undeniable as far as I'm concerned. Those are all meanings of life. Life is so meaningful, you think, this is worth the suffering. If you watched your lives day to day, week to week, month to month, you'll notice that there are times when you're so deeply engaged in what you're doing, when what you're doing is so meaningful. Meaning is what makes the suffering worthwhile. Is that real? It's not something you think up, it's something that you discover. And you can watch, you can see, day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour, week to week, there are acts that are unquestionably evil. And that means that there are acts that are unquestionably good. Virtually everyone loves music, and music speaks of meaning. It does it directly. It shows you what life would be like if it was ordered and harmonious, and you were dancing along with it properly. You find it in art, you find it in literature, you find it in the relationships you have with others, if those relationships are founded on trust and truth. You find it in what you say and do, if what you say and do comes from the heart. You can experience that. If you don't think that's meaningful, man, there's something wrong with your soul. We all suffer. The suffering is exacerbated by the malevolence in our hearts and the malevolence in the hearts of all of us. And the paramount issue that faces us is what to do about that. And I also think that we all know this. Now, it's not that we can't question it, because we can question it, but the questioning is, in some sense, the questioning is beside the point. It's missing the point. You have to take responsibility for being. You have to do that voluntarily, and that means that you have to take responsibility for the suffering of being and accept it and work to ameliorate it. And you have to do that voluntarily. And that's a barrier. Live a life that manifests itself as meaningful. It's easy just to sit there and do nothing. What's the mystery is why you ever get up and do anything difficult at all. Procrastination is the default, and because I don't think that we can create our own values. I think that we have to discover them. And I think that what we discover are eternal values. And it has to be good for you in a way that's good for your children. And that has to work in society. And it has to be something that you can play out moment by moment. We have an idea built into our human rights legislation that all the rights are equal in some sense. And that can't be true, because rights conflict with one another. It's not a new problem. It's an extraordinarily old problem, because there's no difference between determining the hierarchy of your rights and determining how to live together successfully. Because you won't be what you could be without shouldering that communal responsibility. And then you'll pay for that in your individual life, because you'll be shallow and immature and weak and clueless and a puppet and a sheep and all of that. And people think of free speech as kind of like a decoration, something like that in your life. It's not that at all. It's not the ability to speak truth to power, although it is also that. It's not that. It's way more than that. Free speech is how you think. The ethic emerges from the bottom up as we learn how to organize ourselves in ever more complex societies, sustainable societies. And we don't know what we're doing. Okay, but then what happens is, because we're insanely curious and capable of self-recognition, we start to tell stories about how it is that we're acting. The daunting task before us is to understand the source of our values explicitly, and then to have an intelligent, broad-scale, intense public discussion about the ranking of those values. What's at the top? What's at the bottom? It's the major challenge facing our civilization, as far as I'm concerned. It's much more crisis than the climate. That if we solve this other problem, we'll solve that problem. If we don't solve this other problem, we'll just make it worse, way worse in ways we can hardly imagine. Are some values higher than others? And if so, what are the highest values? And what are they opposed to? And how do we embody them? You see that in your wrestling with your conscience. Virtually universal experience. Like, what the hell is that exactly, wrestling with your conscience? Why can't you just tell yourself what to do and you listen? Well, you're not like that. Something in you resists. It's necessary for us to recognize our capacity for evil, to deeply recognize that, and to become better people. We're too powerful to not be better. You have a political responsibility. You have a communal responsibility, and you need to shoulder those responsibilities for a variety of reasons. Partly because none of those systems will work without you, and you won't work without them. I have learned that if you say something to someone and they don't listen, and that happens a couple of times, then you are not where you think you are, and you're not talking to who you think you're talking to. You're somewhere else, and you better clue in quick, or you're going to make a fool of yourself, at least. One of the things that I've noticed about the intellectual dark web types are all people who have their independent media platforms, right? They're not part of a corporate structure.
beholden to anyone. They're financially independent, and they built that themselves, and so they can say what they want. So that's kind of cool to see that happening, to see the technology that enables online video, which is really a complex form of broadcasting, and also online podcasts, which is a complex form of radio, enable that sort of independent journalism. That's a very good thing, and I'm thinking that might be a real positive. Outcome of the social media revolution, because it really is a revolution to have video on demand like that, and to have it so easy to produce, and to have it permanent, and to have it distributed everywhere in the world, and to have it subtitled in all sorts of different languages, and to have it essentially free of charge and able to be produced in a day or two. I'm optimistic about it, because one of the things that really is cool about the internet is that, if you want to learn something, you can pretty much type in your question, whatever it is, and somebody will have put up a YouTube video that tells you how to do it. I mean, there's lots of downsides. I think Twitter is a downside. It's a pretty rough platform, and the commentary on social media platforms can be pretty brutal. We really haven't figured out how to regulate it well yet, so that it's civilized. It's one of the advantages of this new media type, is that you have it on demand, and you can play it at your leisure, or when you're working, for that matter. And so, I have all sorts of working class guys come up and talk to me after the show, long haul truck drivers and those sorts of people who have a lot of time. And the other thing the intellectual dark web people have in common is that, they're opinionated and fairly tough-minded, but more importantly, they don't think their audience is stupid. But YouTube and podcasts have opened up a huge market for intellectual material in a manner that's never really happened before. And you're also seeing this happen with audiobooks. They have spare time to listen, and they're listening to 3-hour Joe Rogan podcasts on all sorts of abstract subjects, and my lectures as well, and it's really something to see that happening. And so God only knows what the consequence of that is going to be. That could be a real education revolution, and hopefully we'll be smart enough to take advantage of that carefully.